Boys and girls, today I only have one story, but you can tell what the type of transportation is, can't you? It's a little tugboat. Hey, we know that guy. That's Little Toot. He was the one who started off just being a player and then he became a worker. Well, this is called Little Toot and the Lighthouse. It's by Hardy Gramatke again. He wrote the words, so he's called the author, and he drew the picture, so he's the illustrator. Real or pretend? Well, it's a tugboat that has a face. There's your clue. Yep, it's pretend. What's Mrs. Casamasa's library word for that? Yep, fiction. Fake fiction. Here it is. Oh, here's the title page. Little Toot and the Lighthouse. Little Toot lived at the foot of an old wharf right in the middle of New York Harbor. It was a busy place. Each day, Little Toot and the other tugboats would push big ships into the docks to be unloaded and then tow them out to the wide open seas. Look at that. There's the cityscape. That is New York City. It was hard work, but Little Toot loved every minute of it. He loved riding the big ocean waves. He loved to whistle toot, toot, toot to the ocean liners and boats he recognized. But sometimes Little Toot would look out to that sea and imagine all sorts of adventures beyond his harbor waves. I want to see new things, he told his father, Big Toot. I want to explore new places.
Oh, that's a great idea, said Big Toot. Why don't we take a trip? We can visit some friends in Maine.
Yes, cried Little Toot. He was so excited. Balls of smoke puffed out of his candy stick smokestack. The flag at his masthead danced in the breeze. Toot, toot, toot. The next morning, Little Toot and Big Toot set out for the coast of Maine. They passed the beaches of Connecticut and Rhode Island. Those are states too, just like New York. Big Toot pointed out bridges and fishing piers along the way. Once, Little Toot saw a long, noisy train snaking its way along the railroad tracks at the water's edge.
Remember these tracks and bridges and piers. They are all landmarks, Big Toot explained. We'll see them again on our trip back, and they'll help us find our way home.
When the sun started to go down, Big Toot and Little Toot anchored at Buzzards Bay for the night. Early the next morning, they set off again. It was a beautiful day. The water was calm and friendly seagulls flew overhead. After a while, they came to a tall white lighthouse, its red light blinking brightly. 6 seconds on, 6 seconds off. It jutted out into the ocean, surrounded by big gray rocks. Little Toot stared up at it in awe. Wow, he said.
That's Noble Light, said Big Toot. That means we've arrived in Maine. It's not too much farther now.
Hooray, cheered Little Toot. A little farther on, Little Toot saw a beach dotted with pine trees. Families picnicked on the white sand, and children in brightly colored swimsuits tumbled into the ocean waves. Let's stop and play, Little Toot said. But Big Toot didn't think that was a good idea.
We've come a long way, he said. Let's explore later.
They traveled for a little while longer and finally reached the dock where they would be staying. Fishing boats called hello to their dear friend Big Toot. Little Toot smiled at them all. Hi, said a small rowboat floating up to the tugboats. My name is Bob. So there's Bob. Bob told Little Toot all about the fishing harbor. He showed the tugboat the lobster traps stacked up on the dock and the tide pools where sea urchins collected at low tide. Little Toot taught Bob how to play the thread the needle and how to cut figure eights. I think they just made friends. What What do you want to do now? Asked Bob. Well, what about the pretty beach with the pine trees? Little Toot asked eagerly. Can you take me there? Bob spun around excitedly. Which one do you mean? He asked. Well, I passed it on the way here, Little Toot explained. Maybe we can explore together. Big Toot was busy laughing with some lobster boats, so Little Toot left without even saying goodbye. He and Bob floated merrily out into the open sea. They splashed in the water, spraying each other with water. Fishermen headed to check their lobster traps. They waved to the little boats. Toot, 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 Little Toot whistled back. I don't have a good feeling about this. They didn't say goodbye to their grown-ups. They didn't even tell their grown-ups where they were going. Uh-oh, my heart's beating a little faster because I'm thinking I'm nervous for them. Soon they spied the sparkling white beach. The two boats bobbed along close to the shore. Little Toot sent out a volley of smoke balls as a greeting. Toot, toot, toot. The little children laughed and waved and shouted happily to the little boats. Little Toot and Bob darted around in wide figure eights. They couldn't help but show off a bit. It was so much fun. The friends played by the beach for hours. Do you like to play at the beach too? Soon enough, I hope. Then, Little Toot noticed that the shadows were starting to lengthen as the sun began to set. The sky was lit with a beautiful red glow. Families started packing up their blankets and towels, getting ready to leave. We better hurry and get back to the dock, Little Toot told Bob. No one even knows where we are. Okay, said Bob. Then he frowned. Which way do we go? He looks a little worried. Little Toot looked around. He and Bob floated near some big rocks. To the left of the rocks, he saw a red buoy. To the right, he glimpsed a yellow buoy. Neither one looked familiar. He had been too busy peering at the beach to notice anything nearby. I'm not sure which way to go, Little Toot stammered. A chilly wind blew and the boats shivered. The sun dipped below the horizon and the day grew darker still. I want to go home, Bob said. He began to cry. Oh, Little Toot even has a tear. Little Toot wanted to find his father. He didn't want to be out in the cold, dark ocean, lost and afraid, and very, very far from his home. A tear rolled down his cheek, but then he took a deep breath. I'm wasting time, he told himself. I've got to be brave for Bob. I've got to think things through. Well, let's go this way, Little Toot declared, motioning toward the red buoy. The two friends floated past that buoy and the waves grew rougher. Is this right? Little Toot wondered. Is this the way to go? Look, Bob said with a squeal. There's a lighthouse ahead. A lighthouse? Little Toot peered into the darkness and saw the blinking red light. Why, that was Nubble Light, the same lighthouse he and Big Toot had passed on their way to the dock. Little Toot stopped so suddenly, Bob bumped right into him. That lighthouse is a landmark, Little Toot said. It will help us find our way back. Little Toot took a deep breath. He thought hard about those landmarks, everything he and Bob had passed on their way to the beach, but they hadn't passed that lighthouse. That was for sure. So this must be the wrong direction. The dock is the other way, Little Toot told his friend. Let's turn around and we'll be there before we know it. He realized he was going the wrong way, so they're turning around. The boats drifted past the beach and the yellow buoy, and then soon they passed the big silver buoy, its bell ringing. Yes, Little Toot said, I remember seeing this landmark on the way to the beach. And there, up ahead, was the dock. He could see Big Toot waving his flag. Uh-oh. Big Toot's waiting for him. I don't know. Do you think Big Toot is going to be upset? Thank goodness you're okay, Big Toot said when the boats neared the dock. You know you should always tell me before you take off like that. We were all so worried. Before Little Toot could explain, Bob piped up. We went to the beach with the big pine trees. We played games and we made the children laugh and we had so much fun. But then we got lost. I was scared, but Little Toot was so brave. He saved us.
Weren't you afraid too? A fishing boat asked Little Toot.
Nope, Little Toot said proudly. I don't know about that. Then he paused a moment. If Big Toot hadn't taught him about landmarks, he wouldn't have found his way back. Well, maybe a little worried, he admitted with a grin. When the vacation was over, Little Toot and Big Toot set off for home. Little Toot led the way, past beaches, train tracks, fishing piers, and bridges. Toot, 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 he whistled at each landmark. I know exactly how to go. Now, Little Toot had a big problem. What was this problem? Little Toot and Bob left without saying goodbye and telling their grown-ups where they went. But what happened? The big problem was they got lost. Yup, they got lost. Well, how did they fix the problem? How did that problem get fixed? Little Toot remembered about landmarks, things that he saw around him on his trips. And then he could just go backwards and find his way back. And that's what happened. He found the lighthouse and then he realized, wait, that wasn't on my way to the beach. And he turned around and went back. Now I shouldn't say a big problem. Another little problem was, would Big Toot be angry? What feeling did Big Toot have? Was he angry? No, he felt worried. So when he saw Little Toot and Bob, he was relieved. Whew. He wasn't angry. He was relieved. And they learned a lesson, didn't they? Make sure you tell your grown-ups if you're going somewhere. Well, don't tell them. You should ask them.